Let me ask you, Mr. Garza, clearly this is an argument about whether or not there's an emergency. We know in 2017, over 70,000 Americans died of overdoses, primarily due to opioids, fentanyl and heroin. That is more than the 58,000 people who died in all of the years of the Vietnam War combined. 1 year, 70,000 Americans dead from drugs that come primarily 80 to 90% from the southern border. Is that not an emergency, sir?
Clearly, it's a humanitarian crisis and it's an emergency. What we see right now is between ports of entry, we see a lot of dangerous drugs. And what you have to consider is that between ports of entry, that those are considered unsecured location, unlike ports of entry. Ports of entry are secure locations with technology and manpower. Between ports of entry, we don't have that technology. We don't have that manpower. And yes, it is a crisis, and President Trump should declare an emergency.
Well, and see, you see this every day. The men and women you represent see this every day. Mr. Homan, you know, your experience, too, I think is invaluable here in that there's arguments from the Democrats who say, well, most of this comes in through the secured port of entries. What does that tell you about, but even if it was true, what does that tell you that what happens with the unsecured areas if all of these drugs, if they, as they argue, are coming in from the ports of entry? All the more reason why we would need the wall, correct?
Look, the Democrats are twisting the story. What the fact is, more drugs are seized at the port of entry because every car is stopped. Every person is talked to. So, of course, they're going to find more drugs because they got better security. That doesn't mean drugs aren't coming across between the ports of entry, because there's places where cars can drive through to barbed wire fencing. They can be smuggled on backpack. So, of course, more drugs arrested at the port of entry. That's why we need security between the ports of entry so we can arrest more of that. I mean, they just turn that story around against American people. Again, it's that false narrative they send that drugs don't come across that border. You got a Border Patrol agent sitting there with you. When I was a Border Patrol agent, well, I had 221 kilos in the truck to come across a barbed wire fence.
Yeah, and
it happens.
There's Mr. Garza, there's this attitude also of like what we find or what we interdict is all that's coming over. The problem is what we don't. The problem is what we don't know. And what we know that border walls that do exist, what they've stopped, over 90% of the illegal activity. Can we expect that with what we're going to be building now, with whether it's at the Rio Grande or wherever the president needs to start?
So first of all, this border bill is not good for border security. It's actually very, very bad. If you look at the 55 miles of border wall that were approved in this border bill, the language in there restricts of where we can build that border wall. As a matter of fact, in the Rio Grande Valley, those are areas that are very, very busy, where drugs are coming across and very dangerous criminals. Now think about this, Tammy. We have about 4 agents that encounter about 300 illegal aliens out there. That part of the border is not secure anymore because those 4 agents now have to go in and process those illegal aliens.
Great point.